Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and we're here for another Linux First Impressions. This week is Crux Linux, and without further ado, let's get started. So, Crux Linux is a version of Linux based out of Sweden. It's also another source-based distribution, much like Gentoo. Everything had to come from ground up. Very difficult to get started for any newbie. I would not suggest anybody with very limited experience with Linux to try Crux unless they just really want to dive right in and check it out. So before I get too much into the OS, I'm just going to go over a few of my notes that I kind of came up with while installing this. When I first started it up, it did load proper. However, I had many issues getting my wireless networking started up. This system has an IWL Wi-Fi 6000 something series Intel style, and of course needs special firmware. Luckily I had the firmware within my Gentoo, so I could pull it in, and then once I did that, it took me a little bit to get the initialization and so forth going. If I start talking a little too fast, it's because I've had some comments that I talk too slow and that I put them to sleep, and that they've been listening to me to get to sleep. So hopefully a little bit more animated. Hopefully I'll be a little bit more animated here and be able to show you guys this stuff. Try something a little bit new, and we'll go forward. Anyway, like I said, many issues trying to get the networking running. Of course, like I said, I'm doing wireless, not wired. If I'd been doing wired, it probably would have been just like that and would have been working fine. I did end up going from DHCP to static IP just because it seemed a little bit simpler and more reliable. Don't ask me why. The DHCP client seemed to act kind of flaky sometimes on here, and we move on. I did not want to do an XFCE since we could do anything we want, since this starts out with nothing but bare bones CLI, so I went with KDE. I did install XFCE just to try it out, see how it worked, because KDE is much larger of a package setup than XFCE. It did take me, I have been working on this forever. Every waking moment, every time I go to sleep, I am dreaming code. That's how much I've been working on this. But anyway, some issues that I did run into running into KDE here was the MySQL package had problems. It had to do with, I noticed a couple different packages had issues. If it needed to create a user special for that package, such as a MySQL user and a MySQL group, it seemed to fail every time. So I had to create those manually, then get past it. Subversion 1.8.0 downloaded location was not proper. All I could find was 1.8.1, and so I had to find it in an archive location. Qt4 packages had numerous issues just to set up. So I mean, these are all things, they're not breakable issues. These are just issues that I ran into that if you weren't really familiar with how Linux works now, a source-based OS can run, you're going to run into problems and get stuck and not be able to fix stuff. Some of these issues too, you got to compile, break! You got to start all over again. And you got to figure out what it is, and compile, break! And try it again. A lot of that going on. But as we move on, Qt4 had issues. Also some issues. I was trying to do the full KDE4, everything, because I want to see it all work. And there were still issues with dependency libraries that should have been installed before the other programs. And so we get along with the fact that halfway through it started failing with KDE4 config failures, which I found out KDE4 config is a part of the KDE libs file, so I went ahead and installed it. Voila, fixed those problems, moved on. WebKit failures constantly. It was trying to install WebKit before I ever got the GUI up and running. I knew that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't require WebKit, and after it just kept breaking and nothing I could do to get past it, I was finally able to remove it out of the dependency tree that it was trying to do for the full meta package. Just blow it away, and as you can see, I don't need it. It's running, everything's good. And we move on. Package relocation, missing applications from repos, bad repo locations, all of those sort of things I ran into. Now, Crux does things kind of a port way. In regards to once you get your base system up and running, you got to enable a contrib port, a core port, a few other ports that are in there, and then for other things you got to grab the ports and install them. We're here at the web page here for Crux, and if we go into the ports, they will give you a list of what ports are available. And as you can see, there's a lot of ports here, like core, opt, XOR. Those are your main ones. If you want compatibility for 32-bit, there it is. And KDE4. Now, in the beginning, I was thinking, oh man, all I got is this. This is not a system you want to install if you don't have a second system handy to be able to look up, do your research, and keep running when you run into problems. In fact, I almost wanted to put this into a VirtualBox just so I had a little bit more support, and decided not to. It was difficult. But you know what? I love the challenge. This was fun. Despite the fact that I racked my brains, and every time I go to sleep at night for the last 3 nights, all I see is code and stuff in my head going on about how to fix something, trying to fix it, because little things bug me to death when they don't work. I've got to make it work. So there are a few things that still are kind of broken that I just gave up with, because while that section is broken, it still runs. For instance, after everything was running, I still have a problem with the dbus service, and therefore I'm having issues with power management, battery, that sort of thing. It was erroring out. It's not erroring anymore, but it still gives me errors when I try to manage it, saying there's not a good back end. If I put the dbus into the service, that sort of stuff is able to be looked at, but then they have problems with the fact that KDE runs slower than molasses, and everything kind of comes to a crawl, and that's no fun. So I don't need power management for just a simple thing like this. Yeah, who needs power management? Anyway, moving on. I got KDE4 there. I grabbed the XFCE. A lot of this stuff, too, isn't very intuitive. And believe me, I have read their handbook backwards and forward, inside and out. Every little wiki that I could put my hands on. Now, the good news is I was able to find workarounds, ways to get things to work. A nice thing about a source-based thing is if they run into problems such as this issue here with packages being missing or all that sort of good thing, you can go looking for packages, you can find these things, you can get them downloaded, put them in the right spot, and make it start running again. Or you can just go ahead and say, forget it, I'm just going to grab the package straight from the people and install it myself just by doing the config commands, make, install. You're good to go. As we move on, this is very much like BSD in many ways. Yeah, it even says that there in the beginning. If we look here, Crux is a lightweight Linux distribution for the x86-64 architecture, targeted experienced users. And may I say, they mean experienced users. I mean, that's, like I said, this was a lot of toughness to get this all working and get it up and running in 1 week so that I can showcase this thing. I really was thinking, man, I'm going to have to take 2 weeks just to get everything prepped and going, but I got it all done. So, here we go. Going on, it's a BSD style knit scripts, so forth, so on. I saw a lot of stuff that's very similar, more of a look towards the BSD side of the house than, say, Gentoo. As we go on in my notes here, issues with this could not find simple ways to get needed ports. I then found out that a lot of these ports were simple files with 2 or 3 lines of code. I could have wrote the text files just by looking at it here and there and putting them in. Something very simple in the long run, but no good way that I could find in the handbook about how to grab ports when you didn't have. There probably is. I just didn't see it. Moving on. Let's see. Like I said, very simple to create with a text editor. I really prefer Gentoo's portage over Crux's ports, though. The nice thing about portage is, man, you just install it and emerge and tell it what file you're looking for, and it's there. None of this whole, we only have a few things. And that's another thing. There's no specific place for all of their programs. They're actually going out to KDE's websites and QD's website and any other person's website and just grabbing their source code from their place. What happens is these packages aren't being updated in time, and say, like for instance, Qt, the packages would already been moved to another location because the newest packages are available, and it's going to fail. And I go in there, look on another computer, say, oh, that's what happened. I grab that package from there, throw it where it needs to go. Okay, now it's working because it has the package, it sees it goes on. It would have been really nice, and it would be nice, if all of these sort of things, that I know it's a little bit more time, but if they were all in one centralized spot to grab them from, like a proper mirror, say, in Gentoo does, where you say, okay, look at this mirror, and all of the files are there to grab. All the source code is right there ready for you. But either way, the good thing is, if you know what you're doing, you can find it. Let's see. It was very time consuming with that, as I said right there. And then documentation, no offense to Crux, I did get it running and all that sort of thing, but man, Gentoo's documentation is spot on. You may have hundreds of pages in their handbook, but it really explains things, and it has a much better packet handling method with their use flags, especially their use flags. I found so many issues within Crux that were problems, such as I tried to install Handbrake just to see how it would work, and it installed finally, but I'm getting GDK issues because for some reason it's trying to use GDK2 and GDK3. Now, where did these two things come from? I got KDE here, not GNOME, but there's no good way to find out what is depending upon different stuff to figure out to fix it. So I was just like, forget it. I had all kinds of problems trying to get things like OpenShot to install. I finally gave up on it because it's having a problem with MLT bindings within Python, which I thought I had started to get fixed, but it's still not working. I did get Cinelera, and I'm going to go over that in just a little bit. These are all the packages that I kind of installed. Since this comes up with nothing, it's all up to me to put something on here for you to see. As we move on, package building was murder before I found speeding up the time. For instance, in the beginning, it was not compiled well at all to be good for this system, with these processors. That should have been in the documentation, in my opinion. You should tell you right up front when doing the installation, edit the file to add your make options and things like that. Because I was sitting there watching code crawl almost slower than compiling it on my Raspberry Pi. And this thing is fast, Core i7. I've never had problems. I normally install Gentoo in hours, not days. And I finally figured out how to make things work faster. There is a wiki article about making stuff work, but that sort of stuff ought to be in the handbook, telling you right up front, these are things that you really should look at. Anyway, after doing that, like I said, I had all kinds of dbus issues with the power management. The system screams without dbus. As soon as I put it on, it just comes to a crawl and dies. I did do some customizations, set up the desktop to make it look nice, and here we go. That's all my notes. Let's close that out. Let's close this out. As you can see, I put my little moon thing because I always like to see what it looks like, how close we're getting to a full moon, new moon. I've got some nifty little, let me go ahead and lock my widgets. I hate it when I popping up all those things. Temperature monitor, you see I'm running kind of hot. It's 32 degrees Celsius. This is pretty cool because I can see how my processors are running and how much utilization is there. And I found this nifty RSS tool, so I got the KDE now /linux.com, distro watch Gentoo, you name it, you can throw it in there. That's a real neat thing to do. Let's move my mug over here for a little bit and we'll take a look at the applications. Now, this does have the KDE with everything on there, so we just take a quick look. I went ahead and installed KDevelop 4 to test that out. Worked really well with the instructions from KDE's website to put that on there. I had to go through their website and do it manually to do it, but as you can see, there's the other stuff that comes with it, with a full install of KDE. This is all mostly KDE stuff. All the things you're going to get if you did a full install. I did go in here to the games. I installed the excuse me. I installed the Extreme Tux Racer, which I'm not sure if it put it properly in the menus, because I don't think I ever found it in the menus, but I did know that it did work. I did set it up to use the free NVIDIA drivers with Nauvoo. Those worked great once I compiled the kernel. That's another thing, Crux, you have to compile the kernel completely with it. So don't be afraid. Took me 2 or 3 times to really tweak it out and make it proper, and I got it really nice in the end. Pretty nifty. In the graphics area, let's see here. I went ahead and installed GIMP. Everything else you see here is pretty much Typical. I did put LibreOffice to test it out. Works really well. It is a fast system when you got everything running and up and running, but it sure took a lot to get it going. Inside the internet, it came with Firefox already. I installed Skype and all the 32-bit compatibility and tested it out. It worked great. Nothing else pretty interesting in there. In the multimedia, I went ahead and installed Cinelera for video editing. Like I said, my first choice is OpenShot. I couldn't get OpenShot to work right, and the reason why it keeps failing is Python bindings with MLT. I finally figured out how to build MLT from scratch. The MLT packages that came with Crux were broken, did not work. I got the source code directly from the website, compiled it, still having MLT binding issues, but so be it. I had a difficult time getting GUVC View to work. I ended up having to install the source code straight from the site. Once again, the packages from Crux in their ports were bad, didn't work, but I was able to get it working straight from their main source code. VLC I had to install manually. OpenShot you'll see is there because I haven't tried to get rid of it yet, but it doesn't work. It just kind of errors out there. It came, of course, with Dragon Player, which doesn't work with MP4 players that I have found out of the box. I haven't tried to tweak it. That's why I always throw VLC in there. And let's see, Simple Screen Recorder I did as well, so that I can do what we're doing now, screen capture. In the office there, LibreOffice, I said I installed that. And system settings, regular settings. I found it interesting that I actually had to install some extra packages to make sure I could get things like KUser and a few other system setting type things to get on there. That was kind of strange. Some might scream that you've got Thunar File Manager. That's only because I also installed XFCE. Now, Crux is a pretty cool way to learn something. As I think I might have had in my notes that I didn't mention, the best thing about doing a source-based distribution from the ground up is the fact that you learn so much. And even though I've been using a source-based distro for so long, I found new things that taught me stuff that I might take back to Gentoo and then try to incorporate, because some of this stuff is neat. And you know, when you open your mind up to different distributions, checking them out and all that, you find all kinds of little things that are cool. And the neat thing about Linux is the fact that no matter what distribution you're using, unless you're using something really proprietary and screwed up like Red Hat, which takes, in my opinion, disclaimer, my opinion, Red Hat has screwed up Linux so badly because they've turned it into a corporate version that you cannot use any other packages with. You've got to use the RPMs that they come with. They've messed it up so much to the point where you can't really call it Linux anymore. It's Red Hat, and that's that. But most distributions, if it's a proper flavor of Linux, you should be able to take the same stuff that you find in the Debian wikis, that you find in the Ubuntu wikis, that you find in the Gentoo wikis, and you should be able to apply it even to the Debian wiki. You know, everything, if it's a proper Linux, everything's going to be in the right places, everything's going to be there. You should be able to grab source, install it, and put it right in there and make it work. And that's exactly what I was able to do with Crux. It made it quite nice to be able to say, okay, their packages are broken, or whatever they did to maintain stuff is broken, so let's just grab the source code, run with it, get it going. Because it works great, and it was wonderful. And I enjoyed it. You know, the sad thing about this is, I almost hate to have to blow it away so I can go to the next distribution, because I have spent more time on Crux just developing it, getting it running, shaping it, making it work. I didn't even get the GUI working until Wednesday night. And you know how much, when you're just compiling and compiling and compiling, and you just hope that when you're all done with it, that it works. Because if it doesn't, you got to figure out what went wrong, where it went wrong, and start compiling again so you can see what you can get. I did have a lot of problems with my sound. In fact, I had a dickens of a time getting just the microphone to work right, and I'm still not exactly sure. It's really weird. In my user profile, I could not get sound to work whatsoever. I then decided, just for grins, let's go into the root profile, see what it does. I could actually configure it, make it work, keep it on, because I kept setting it, and it kept defaulting back to 0 with no pickup, no gain. So I gave myself a little bit more access right within KUser and tried a few different things, and voila, got the sound to finally go. So here we have sound. I went with the retro black and white because everything else kind of has that gray scale to it, and I said, why not? I got nothing fancy to wear anyway. Let's just make this all a pretty laid back, cool Crux. I like that about this background here. Minimize me for a minute so you can just take another look at this thing. I like this artwork. I always like to go out and try to find artwork or something like that for the Linux distribution I'm testing out. So here is this one. Man, I feel like I've been talking a million miles an hour. So I think I should probably end this video on Crux Linux. Hopefully I covered everything that I wanted to say about it. It's a pretty cool distribution. Very difficult for the new guy. However, if you've had 2 or 3 years of experience, go for it. Now, I've had a couple of people actually want my help with doing Gentoo distributions, and what I finally suggested that people do is just put it in just for this type of thing, go ahead and put it in a virtual box, just so you can get your hands wet and try different things with it and test it out just a wee bit, figure out a few things before you actually throw it onto a partition. The only negative thing about that is, like this, I have spent dedicated probably at least the last 4 or 5 days just making this thing cool. And with all that work doing that, I really would have hated to have had it gotten all done in the virtual box and then said, okay, now I want to do it for real and have to start all over. Other than the fact that now I might know a few more things that I need to do. I might have, whenever you do something, if you're going to use that quick tip, always back up the unique files that you may need to use again. You can always reuse configuration files. You can always reuse a lot of scripts. You can always reuse your port files and so forth. It's always good, no matter what distribution, if you find an application runs really smartly in the way that you've set it up, then back up those configuration files, because those configs will work somewhere else, and it will save you loads of time trying to remember, what did I do to make that work? Because you'll have those configuration files. So that's the last thing I'll say before I sign off here. Whatever you're having, if it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments. I hope you enjoy this one, because this took a lot of sweat, blood, and tears to make it work for you. And I'm happy I was able to do something like this so that you guys can take a look at it and just go from here. Have fun. We'll talk to y'all later. See ya. Bye.